shook the poop out of Mark Twain.
It's no fault
What
on
other
you.
person
It's-
in
it's-
history can you say that
What
happened?
we really learned here today is that physicists are interested in people. Hello and welcome to What's on the Fourth Floor. I'm your host, Carter Walford, along with my co-hosts,
Ethan Goebbels.
Taylor Billington.
Today we're going to start out with This Day in Science History, which
All right.
Taylor has for us. What do you got?
So this is pretty much operating under the assumption that this episode will be released on December 6th. And so I'm sure you guys know about Thomas Edison, right?
I've heard of him.
Who? Actually, this is kind of ironic because I'll be talking about Nikola Tesla later on today. So,
Who had a bit of a beef with Thomas Edison.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know about that. Okay, well, anyways, Thomas Edison, right? He made the
You learn
phonograph.
something new every day, hence the purpose of the podcast.
He made a lot of things. He made the phonograph, and the very first recording that he made on the phonograph, they don't know for sure,
Okay.
but they're pretty sure it happened on December 6th.
What? Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In
Was his very first recording a
1877.
podcast? Because I
No.
feel like that would have been really awesome.
No, his first recording was actually him saying Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Oh, yeah, I did know that. Okay.
Yeah, and they don't have the original, but they have like a recreation of him doing it. It's kind of funny.
Oh,
But
I want to hear his voice.
yeah, maybe we can link to it in the show notes. But
Wow, this is okay. I also have another topic that's kind of about like recreating dead people.
oh, I don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like your face there, Taylor.
Yeah, I don't
It's a
really
bit-
know how to
it's a bit
respond to
macabre
that.
and spooky,
A
but
little bit.
I'm sure it won't be later.
Well, so I thought it was interesting, right? Because I was looking into other things to say about this, and so apparently the very next day, like he'd made the first recording, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day he goes into the office of the Scientific American, which apparently was a thing back then. It's
Really?
the oldest monthly produced magazine
About science.
at all in the
USA.
U.S.
Oh, in the
U.S.
U.S.
In the U.S.,
Oh,
yeah.
really?
It's been
Scientific
around
American.
since-
Not everywhere. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, no, it's been around since 1845,
Wow.
which
Oh.
is a long time.
Little shout out to the science community there.
Yeah, so he
Built to last.
so he walked into the office, and from how they describe it, he walked in, he didn't say anything, he set the phonograph on the table and just turned the
Just
crank, and it
played it.
said,
Nice.
"Good morning, how do you do? How do you like the phonograph?" And they were just blown away.
Wow.
That's style points,
He
right?
knows how to
there.
enter a room.
You know, you get that's how you get the investors. 'Cause
Yeah.
That was very important back in Edison's time. The investors.
Yeah, the
He was
investors.
trying to
yeah.
get the power plant set up. This reminds me of Alexander Graham Bell's first telephone call, which was "Watson, get in here, I need you," which I only know because of Doctor Who. But
Yeah, I love when we can
Well,
get
that-
our history from that.
a little history to start off your podcast.
I love it. I love it, Taylor. That was awesome.
That was
and I
great.
love it. This will all come full circle
Mhm.
in multiple ways.
Well, I also had one more fact about him that I thought was really interesting. So his mother and his wife were both deaf. So he's very active in the deaf community. Like that was what he
Really?
Mm.
like. He was an inventor, and he wanted to help deaf people out pretty
makes sense.
much.
So he made a device that records sounds and plays them back.
It's something that a deaf person cannot use.
Cannot
Well, I
appreciate.
I think he did make the telephone for his wife. I don't really see the connection there because she wouldn't be able to use it. But
He just dedicated it to his wife, maybe? I
yeah,
don't
he
know.
dedicated it to his wife. He also, so you guys know about Helen Keller, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of,
Mhm.
I don't know if they were friends or if this guy just knew about him, but Helen Keller's dad, when she was 6, like introduced her to Thomas Edison and was like, "Hey, can you help my daughter? I don't really know what to do with her." And he's actually the person who linked her up with Anne Sullivan, who
Really? Thomas Edison was?
yeah,
Small world.
Wow. Yeah. Nicole
yeah,
was
all the
people you've
famous
heard
people
of,
knew each
yeah.
other back then. There's only
Wow.
like 10 of them. It's inevitable.
Interesting.
We also have a What's With That. I think Ethan has
I
something for us
do.
today.
Yes. So this is the talking point I was talking to, or saying something about recreating dead people. I did not know until I was doing some research earlier that there was such thing as death masks.
Oh,
Do you know what I'm
yes,
talking
I've heard
about?
of the death mask.
They make plaster molds. They used to do this. I don't know if they still do this.
Now I suppose they make
No. This used to
digital
be
scans of people's faces.
Sure. This used to be a big thing in Western culture. Was as soon as somebody died, especially famous people, they would make a plaster mold of their face and put it on display at their wake.
I've heard of like the Lincoln death mask and a few
Yeah,
other like
so
that.
like all these famous people, we have death masks for. Benjamin Franklin, Abraham Lincoln, Beethoven, Mozart.
Is there like a warehouse where they just keep all of them?
Keep
Like
all
who
the
has
faces.
There's
them?
a warehouse. They're at museums.
You
I
can
might
go.
have a list.
You could be a high quality Lincoln impersonator if you go get his death mask. It'd be a bit macabre.
They have a list here. Let me actually go through the list. Yeah, I was just incredible. This Napoleon Bonaparte, Vladimir Lenin. I said Beethoven, Abraham Lincoln, Alfred Hitchcock, which I thought was more recent.
Mm-hmm.
Isaac Newton.
Yes, I've heard of the Newton death mask
Good
as well.
old Isaac. He got on there. Voltaire. This one looks really old.
I'm pretty sure people still do this, but instead of plaster, they just do like digital scans of your face and save them
really?
somewhere. Yeah, and you could
Yeah.
like 3D print off someone's face.
See,
Why?
I don't know. You just
I suppose. Yeah.
now that photos exist, it doesn't make sense. But back in the day, it was like the best way to get a real impression of what that person looked like, because you
Right.
didn't have photographs of them.
Well, I mean, when the camera did come around, death pictures or whatever they
Mhm.
were called, was a thing. So as soon as somebody died, they would like dress them up and like
Yeah,
prop
set
them
'em up.
and,
Yeah.
It's sort of saving the last version of you that we
Right.
got and
Yeah.
keeping that somewhere.
I would
Alfred
ha-
Nobel had one.
I would hate to be the person who made those.
Yeah.
Like-
well, I mean, it was just a regular thing.
It'd be like working in a morgue or something
Taylor
now.
has a look of disgust on her face.
Yeah, I would not be interested in that.
Well, okay, so I looked into it further and found out that there was a science with air quotes called what was it called? Phrenology, where they would take it was basically they had this idea that you could figure out someone's personality or character by analyzing like the bumps
Mhm.
and divots on their heads in
Oh, I think I
specific
have heard of that.
regions. You might have seen pictures of
Yeah.
like these molds of heads where they've like labeled the certain regions where like this they were particularly interested in the region above the ear, right above the ear, where it would tell you if you were like a destructive person. And so they had the idea that they could determine whether or not you were a criminal based on that region of your head. So death masks of criminals especially are really common. So like there's a whole museum in like Australia of all these criminals that right after they were hanged, right after they were hanged, they took a death mask of them so they could study their heads.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about how modern psychology is,
Right.
and like how not too long ago we were really fumbling in the dark, just feeling people's heads.
I know.
Taking out pieces of their brain,
Yeah.
just
Oh,
seeing
yeah.
what happens.
So yeah, that was just like, what the heck is what is with that? You know.
What's with
My
that?
question for you though is, would you allow yourself to have it to be recreated with a death mask?
You know,
Would you be okay with that?
I'm under the thoughts that after I'm dead, society, do whatever you want with my body. I don't need it anymore.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, if there's a use for it, if someone wants to recreate me and even like dress me up and prop me up, I don't care very much.
Wow.
Yeah, you don't need to honor my body or anything.
Okay.
I'm not using it.
Right.
Yeah, like-
yeah, I suppose so.
Personally, I wouldn't want a death mask of someone that I knew, but if someone wanted one of me, then
Sure.
what am I gonna do? I'm dead. Like I don't
you
care.
can't- Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I haven't.
I
I've gone both ways on this since I first found out about it a couple hours ago. But I suppose I'd be okay with it, like you said. And there's nothing I can't stop.
Yeah, it's
from
not like a
happening.
disrespectful thing in any
Right,
way. Like
yeah.
it's
I might be particularly sentimental of like my brain or something though, because that's sort of what we are, is just brains driving meat cars around. So maybe
meat cars.
maybe be
Meat
gentle with the
vehicles.
brain, but again, I'm still not using it anymore, so do whatever you want.
Like Albert Einstein. You've heard of this? Albert Einstein's brain was stolen from his head.
What?
After
I
death.
had not heard of this.
You didn't know about this? I don't remember the name of the doctor, but apparently the doctor that was doing the autopsy on him just could not allow his brain to be buried with his body, or I think he was cremated. He just couldn't allow his brain to be destroyed because he thought there was so much potential in learning about human intelligence from studying his brain.
That's a legitimate reason.
So he took out his brain and later informed his family. And his family was just like, "Are you kidding me? Like, what the heck did you what?" But I think they ended up being fine with it. They're like, "Okay, fine, whatever." But yeah, his brain. Well,
So-
at least slices of his brain still exist.
Did they discover anything from it? Like, did anything come out of that?
I don't know. I don't think so, but
Is his brain still somewhere that you can go look at it?
this is a popular topic. I first learned about this on Ancient Aliens. This is a popular
yes.
topic
A
on that
very,
show because apparently
informative
Albert
show.
Einstein had the capacity to channel some sort of higher dimensional.
That he was an alien?
Maybe he was.
Maybe he was.
Isn't the
Prison.
theory that we're all aliens, though?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's
We
definitely
were
the
all-
Scientology viewpoint.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Is it? I don't know anything about Scientology.
Scientology.
Praise Lord Xenu. But maybe we don't want to go too deep into there. We'll get hacked.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my what's with that. Just I could not.
I also
imagine-
knew that Einstein's last words were said in German to a nurse that did not speak German, so we don't know what they were.
Ooh.
Oh no.
They're lost.
Did he
Well, that
only
stinks.
speak German?
He spoke several languages.
He spoke yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
He was Jewish, so he spoke Hebrew, and actually, I'm assuming he did.
Yep. Safe assumption.
A safe assumption. And he was from Germany, so he spoke German, and he lived in the United States for most of his later life.
Maybe his last words were, "I'm an alien."
Oh, maybe it was.
Preserve my brain.
He was actually instructing the nurse.
She actually knew it was.
Mhm.
Maybe she did.
It's a conspiracy. And with that, I think we have another What's With That.
Do we?
Taylor, what do you got for us?
All right, so this is a question that I asked Ethan the other day, and he said, save it for the podcast.
Oh, that's right.
So here I am, and my
Uh,
question is, if there was an exact clone of yourself, and there was no, I don't know. Okay. If there was an exact clone of yourself, would you be friends with them?
Oh, that's right. I remember
Yes.
this question.
I'll let Ethan. I have to think about this.
Yeah,
one.
okay, yeah, because I did think about it the other day when you asked me, and oddly enough, I have thought about this before, because sometimes you get that feeling where like there's no one out there that really truly understands me, so it'd be kind of cool to have somebody else that just exactly understands
Has
me,
every
you know?
experience that you've ever had.
Right. So I think I would be friends with him for a while, but after a while, it would get a little weird. After a while, I would lose my sense of uniqueness in the world.
Well, I feel like once that other person starts to exist in the world, they would also diverge.
I mean, they would
from you.
diverge. Yeah, exactly. They would diverge, and I totally understand that. But also, like, they would know my thought process enough that if I started to tell them about a thought that they would have, he would be able to like run with it and develop the same idea that I had already developed.
Steal all your inventions.
It'd steal all my
Yeah,
inventions.
that's
exactly.
what I was thinking. If I was with my clone and either of us like became any more successful than the other, we would
Yeah.
get super jealous because like that could have been
Super
me.
jealous.
Do you think
Yeah,
that's how
exactly.
twins feel?
No,
Maybe.
I don't think so. Speaking on behalf of myself, who has no idea what twins think, but
You would gamble no. I think I would be friends with it, but also it'd be yeah,
I said they, but I suppose it'd be a him.
him. I would be friends with him, But it would be sort of very extreme. Any emotion I felt about this person would be very extreme. Like we would get into very intense arguments and
Right.
conflicts. But
Really,
we
you
would also
either
agree on
really
points,
hate this person or
Yeah.
really like this person.
which would be exciting either way. So if anyone wants to clone me, that'd be chill.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I would see this other person who is me interacting with other people, and I would just cringe every
Oh,
time.
yes.
I think I would
What are
You would
hate.
see yourself
I would
interacting with
hate
other
to
people.
be around myself, not because I dislike myself, but because I'd be like, oh, that's how other people see me.
Oh no!
What if Clone You had like more friends than you and was more popular? or
Yeah.
something?
They're exactly me, but for some reason people like them better.
That's
Like, guys,
I don't know.
Please, I'm interesting too. They ask, which one are you? And I'm the original. Okay, please leave. We don't want to talk to you.
Well, I mean, like, it also kind of goes back to like Well, I suppose I don't have an issue with listening to myself when these podcasts come out, but I do have an issue with watching myself. You know,
Like
on a
seeing
video.
yourself move.
Like, or just like seeing myself on a video.
It's like
Like, is
kind
that
of
seriously how I
surreal.
act
I think
in
it's
public?
something
Do I
you just get
actually
used
do
to.
that?
And that if you could, that'd be healthy as a person. You sort of learn what
Sure, I suppose so.
your
But
quirks.
if it makes you like extremely self-conscious and then
Okay,
that's
then
all you
it's less
think about,
healthy.
that's not very healthy.
But if you do sort of learn and say, oh, well, I'm going to do this differently and improve
Right.
yourself, you know,
Right.
it'd be an interesting perspective. That's for certain.
Yeah.
I guess it all depends on your mindset on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only would you be able to watch yourself, the clone situation, not only would you be able to watch yourself interact with somebody else, you would also be able to interact with yourself, essentially, even though they're a entirely different person. At least right after the cloning procedure, when they haven't diverged from you very much, you definitely be able to get a feel for what it's like to interact with yourself.
So, do you think you could beat yourself in a fight?
Absolutely not.
No, I think that would definitely have to be a draw.
A draw, that'd be interesting. I think one of them would get the edge up, just like based on random factors. You
Just
know,
random.
Brownian
I think-
motion.
I think the clone would win every time.
Wow.
you don't believe in yourself.
Not only is that a lack of self-confidence, but it's also self-confidence. You are very.
It's both at the same time.
It's
Yep.
both at the same time. Interesting clone conversations.
Clone Wars.
What if
Yeah, go on.
What if the clone like started to believe that it was the original and then somehow convinced you that you weren't the original and then you just existed thinking you were the clone?
original.
I don't know how this would happen.
Well, it definitely
Well-
could because you would both have the same memories. I'm assuming if you were able to like, maybe not necessarily
but-
It's like
clone.
maybe during the cloning process, you both like go to sleep or something, and it goes dark, and you wake up, and you don't know which is the clone.
True. Ooh, that would be scary.
Would it be though? I feel like if I found out right now, like I was given hard evidence that I was a clone and not a real person, I'd be like, okay, whatever. I'm gonna go on with my life. I don't think it would affect
You don't think
me
you
at
would
all.
question your
Yeah,
sense of self
Nope.
after that?
because it's like, what's the point? I've lived, up to this point, and everything's been fine. So having this information shouldn't detract
Yeah.
from my life so far.
I don't know. I'd have to think about that question a little bit further. But on the surface, I don't think I would be able to deal with knowing. Well, okay. You asked about like what if the clone convinced you, but I don't think I would be able to deal with myself knowing that I was a clone.
Really?
Really.
Would you just like sit around all day thinking about it and be like an existential thing?
Yeah, it would be next. Yeah, because
I feel like you would kind of lose your sense of purpose
Yeah, you
because if there are two of you, then
If
what's
you-
the point of
if you both, because okay, I'm assuming that not only was your body cloned, but your the exact electrical patterns in your
Mhm.
brain was also
you have, like, the
cloned.
same
So you have the
memories.
same memories. So you would then therefore also have the same like motivations, the same life goals. So, but you know that there's somebody. Well, you know that you weren't the original one to have those memories. You didn't actually experience that. I mean, it wouldn't. You know what I mean? As the clone, you would know that your life goals, your life memories are not your own.
anything that the original can
Right.
accomplish can be happen like they can do that without you. So there's no
But now
point.
you can work together and increase, make the world better twofold. I just think you can find an existential crisis anywhere you look. You can have a daily existential crisis just thinking about how you're going to die and the universe is going to end. And so this extra one is nothing new. Existential crises are not, you don't have to have these wild hypotheticals. They're just around.
Fair enough.
You have to find your reason to live.
Fair enough.
Which was,
Yeah, and I mean, with that, actually, I think it's the end of our first segment, isn't it?
We are out of time, and listeners, we'll be back in a few short seconds. And welcome back to another exciting edition of In the News. Today, I think Ethan has an exciting news article for us.
I do. I mean, it's exciting for me because, again, I love astronomy. I love astrophysics. And that's what this one is about. Mm-hmm. First of all, I want to double check that both you and our listeners are aware of some of the background science knowledge that we need to discuss before we talk about this article.
Of course.
Do you guys, you've heard of dark matter before, correct?
I am aware of dark matter.
You're aware of dark matter. It's kind of hard to explain what dark matter is because we named it dark matter because we honestly don't know anything about it. We don't know how it behaves. We don't even know what it is.
The best explanation is when we weigh the universe, it weighs more than what we can see.
Exactly.
And so all that extra mass that we can't account for, we just lump it together.
Yep, and we call it dark matter.
We're
assuming it's some type of matter that just doesn't interact with light in any sort of way. So there's been, obviously, since dark matter was officially discovered, we've been figuring out ways how we're going to try to measure it. How are we going to try to quantify what dark matter is? Recently, we'll jump straight into here. Well, actually, back in 2008, the European Pamela satellite was measuring the number of positrons near the Earth. Positrons are the antimatter particles of electrons. Mm-hmm. So you can think of them as, basically it's an electron.
It's a mirror electron.
It's a mirror electron.
From the dark universe.
Yeah, it's an electron, except an electron has a negative charge. A positron has a positive charge. So this satellite was measuring the number of positrons near Earth, and there was a lot more positrons than scientists initially predicted that there should be. So there was a bit of a mystery. I mean, how do we account for these extra? Where are they coming from? So theorists, as soon as this came out, theorists came up with two possible explanations. Their first explanation dealt with rotating neutron stars. Neutron stars are the densest objects in the universe. They're literally dead stars, the cores of dead stars made up of entirely neutrons.
Discounting black hole singularities,
yeah, because we can't really define a size for black holes. And the rotating neutron stars, we call them pulsars because we can see them pulsating. We can see the light pulsating from them. So their first explanation was, they said, well, maybe these pulsars, the near pulsars near Earth, are violently throwing off positrons, and that can account for these positrons that are just making their way to Earth, and that's how we account for all the extra positrons. Their second explanation was that a specific kind of dark matter, very heavy dark matter particles, were interacting with themselves and mutually destroying themselves. So basically dark matter and like anti-dark matter,
which is the coolest name.
Anti-dark matter. But really specifically heavy types of dark matter were destroying themselves and producing positrons. So these were the two explanations that they came up with. So they had to find a way, okay, how are we going to eliminate one or the other? So in order to do that, an international team of scientists observed the sky with high altitude water Cherenkov Observatory. Are you familiar with what Cherenkov radiation is?
Not off the
No.
top of my
Have you
head.
ever heard of it?
Mm-mm.
I haven't, no.
So this might be something you might just want to Google in your free time. Basically, this actually kind of it happens around nuclear reactors. So you'll see pictures of this in the water. The specific reactions are producing specific kind of radiation, I believe, that actually turns the water blue. Or like it has a blue glow coming from the water.
Okay.
And so we can measure that. And they used that blue glow. So they have these 300 tanks, I think 300 large tanks of water stationed at a high altitude in southern Mexico, measuring Cherenkov radiation that's produced when when pulsars generate positrons. They interact with the matter around them and produce high energy gamma rays, and then we can measure how those gamma rays, when they get to Earth, we can therefore measure the gamma rays using this Cherenkov radiation, and then work backwards and figure out how many positrons are being produced by pulsars. And then knowing how old these pulsars are and how far away they are, we can then predict, well, would these positrons then therefore be coming from the neutrons or neutron stars? Is it far enough away in order for these positrons to still exist by the time they get here?
When they do all the accounting and math and
when they do all the math,
how much
it
everything
doesn't
worked
add
out.
up. So that's the short of it. When they do all the math, it doesn't add up, which means that the explanation for pulsars, for all these extra unaccounted for positrons, doesn't work. So therefore, the second idea that theorists came up with is the one that they're leaning towards.
We're left with the dark matter
We're
annihilation.
left with the dark matter. So this is basically putting us on a path to defining the characteristics of dark matter, which is something that we still haven't been able to do since we first discovered.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a really long explanation of how they discovered it, but I thought it was really cool that now why there was only two explanations, I don't know. I'm not a theorist. So
Yeah, but we have to. It sort of shows off what kind of a roundabout methods we have to take to learn anything at all about dark matter.
Or, I mean, this is kind of the roundabout methods we have to do for almost anything in experimental physics, too. You know, theorists have to come up with, they come up with their theory, like, well, if this is what actually was happening, then we should be able to see this happen in a specific kind of experiment. It's very roundabout, but that's the way we do science. So I thought that was really cool. And it involves lots of different kinds of physics, you know, Cherenkov radiation, and I hope I'm saying that right. I don't.
It's reminding me of sort of the statistical proofs for like the Higgs boson and the LHC. How you don't actually find these things; you just sort of have to over long periods of time.
Right, and you have to work backwards to recreate things. So yeah, I'm just super excited about coming closer to identifying what dark matter actually is.
And it's probably statistically or likely that dark matter isn't just one thing, that it's this whole class of objects that we can't observe through normal means.
And I think I read somewhere, I hope it was on this article, I read a little bit more into it. And remember I said it was a very particular heavy type of dark matter. So scientists have kind of come up with their own
classifications.
Standard model of dark matter, if you will,
which are almost purely theoretical.
Yeah, they are purely theoretical. Yeah. But in a way, we can, if we're able to come up with an experiment to start measuring dark matter, then we'd be able to eliminate which models work and which ones don't. But this heavy type of particle, I hope it's in here. I believe it's something like thousands of times heavier than a proton, which would be like hundreds of times heavier than like the mass of the nucleus of a uranium atom.
So it's something that's very large.
This is one particle of dark matter.
But it's still sort of whizzing through matter and whatnot. The only way it interacts is through gravitational means.
Yeah, exactly, which is how we discovered dark matter in the first place. So, I mean, if we're able to start measuring dark matter, think of all the weird, wacky stuff we're going to find out about it. You know, if this one particle weighs 1,000 times more than an elementary particle in our
I'm definitely
normal
going
matter.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to put the pie chart of like matter in the universe in the show notes, and how it's like what's it, 5% we know and understand,
Exactly.
and then 95% of all energy in the universe is completely foreign and unknown to us.
Exactly. I think I used to know the numbers, but it's 5% is normal matter, 25% is dark matter,
Somewhere around there,
Right.
still a minority, and then most of it is dark energy.
Most of it is dark energy, which is a topic for another day.
Mhm.
Maybe we'll get into that on the podcast, maybe not, but
To be scraping the surface of this class of objects, which is 4 or 5 times more than what we know already,
right,
is
exactly.
very exciting.
It is super exciting, especially for me as a astrophysics nerd. So, that was the first exciting news article. I also have another one if we would like to talk more
boy.
about.
Let's get some more news.
Carter's excited. More science news. You can't ask for anything better, especially on a Saturday, which is when we're recording this, by the way.
But you'll be getting it on a Wednesday.
You'll be getting it on a Wednesday. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So the next one I found talks about mission to Mars, future mission to Mars. You guys excited about
And this
manned missions to Mars?
Is this one that we can put manned mission to Mars?
Yeah.
I was excited about putting my name on a microchip that goes to Mars. So
Oh no.
I would certainly be excited for a manned mission.
Well, no, they haven't really scheduled one. That's not what this one is about. They're not scheduling any manned missions, but they are working out the science that would go into
Putting a man
sustaining
on
a
the
crewed
moon.
mission. Yeah. First of all, I want to ask you: have you guys watched The Martian?
Of course.
Yes.
So for all of you out there who have not seen The Martian, there's a scene where he's sort of talking through all his inventory, what he has, or no, it's talking through all the things that if it fails, I'll die, or if this happens, I'll die. And one of them is
It is a long list.
Yeah, it's a very long list, and one of them is if the oxygenator breaks, I'll die. However, we currently don't have. There's no such thing as an oxygenator.
This is a fictional piece of technology.
This is a fictional piece of technology that I believe Andy Weir came up with for his book. They don't really describe what an oxygenator is.
But presumably it recycles gases and makes oxygen.
Right. Well, see that we do have oxygen reclaimers. That's definitely a thing where, like on the International Space Station, they can recycle our air, the air that they're breathing, and they can pull the oxygen out of the air and put it back into the air for them to breathe. I keep saying us.
Yeah, we aren't personally doing it.
We aren't currently recording
Our
this on
next
the International
podcast
Space
is from
Station.
the ISS.
Yeah, scientists around the world.
Just put us up there. But they don't have any way to actually create the oxygen. They have to carry that with them. So if we could find a way to produce the oxygen once we get to Mars, that's the real ticket.
Just bring a tree.
Just bring a tree. Yeah, just plant it in your own feces. And if I learned anything from the Martian,
we can grow potatoes, and
yeah, exactly.
trees aren't that far off of potatoes. They're about the same.
They're
About the same.
As far as biodiversity on Earth goes, potatoes are pretty much trees. If you go from the whole gambit.
Sure.
Trees do require a little bit more space to grow.
Yeah, for a second there, I thought we were going to have to give Carter a lesson on horticulture.
Maybe another day.
The article, though, that I found talks about trying to create an oxygen supply for manned missions to Mars. And scientists are recently suggested that new plasma technology. They don't really describe what that means, but it's a nice word or fun word to throw out there. Plasma. Plasma technology could hold the key to creating a sustainable oxygen supply on Mars. They suggest that Mars's atmosphere, which is super thin, but it's 96% CO2. Its pressure, I believe, is like 6% or 0.6% of Earth's atmospheric pressure.
Right.
And the temperature of the atmosphere is super low compared to Earth's atmosphere. atmospheric temperature, and they suggest that these are the perfect conditions for using plasma to break apart the CO2 into oxygen, and to produce oxygen from that.
So what plasma does is basically turns particles into soup of protons and electrons and neutrons.
Right.
It's good at
It
breaking
breaks them
apart the
yeah.
bonds. And then once you've done that, you can sort of sift out the parts you want and the parts you don't.
Exactly. Yeah, I think they do kind of mention that you can take a plasma which has an excess of free electrons, and you can use the electrons to bombard carbon dioxide molecule, and all of that extra energy that you're throwing at it by hitting it with these electrons could break apart the bonds between the carbon and the oxygen. That's a very simplistic way of describing it, but I think it's super exciting that they've discovered this method that they could use to oxygenate the HAB.
Yeah, that makes it a lot easier to get to Mars because, oxygen isn't light. For the amount that you'd have to bring up, it would take a lot of rocket fuel.
You would definitely have to have your own supply going there and coming back on the journey. But once you're there, you can start making it yourself.
So maybe you wouldn't have to take enough for both trips there. You could make enough for the trip back.
Exactly. Yeah, I suppose you could. I suppose you could, assuming that you can do it in a reasonable amount of time. I don't know how long this process takes.
Trip as well.
Yeah, assuming a round trip.
Suggestions of not around.
Yeah, I don't think there's any plans. Yeah, I don't think there's any plans by any organization for not a round trip, except for Mars One.
Technology being produced by NASA or one of the private Mars companies?
I don't think it's being produced. It was just a study from the University of Lisbon that suggested that this could be possible in Mars's atmosphere.
All right.
But it's a very important study because technology could potentially be created and we could start testing this out.
The proof of concept.
It's a proof of concept, yeah. Exciting one.
So would this just be like in a building? Like they would be able to do this in one space, or would they like implement it planet-wide?
Oh, are they going to start
terraforming
Mars? I don't think they would just go to Mars and start terraforming right away for one thing.
Well, no, not right away, but down the road.
See, I don't know if this technology, I doubt it this technology would be of the capacity that we could carry, all of this technology there and start terraforming.
Because the atmosphere is so thin, you wouldn't be able to make it planet-wide. Like you'd have an equally thin oxygen atmosphere.
Oh, true. Yeah, because you only have so much carbon dioxide to work with.
Carbon dioxide.
I'm reading here at the bottom. It says not only would it provide a stable, reliable supply of oxygen, but as a source of fuel as well. Since carbon monoxide has been proposed as to be used as propellant mixture in rocket vehicles.
Very resourceful. The space community is.
Exactly. You gotta be.
Nothing goes to waste.
Again, if we learned anything from the Martian,
frontier.
If we learned anything from the Martians, you gotta be resourceful. You gotta. Well.
And you get to be a space pirate.
And you could be. Provided you grow that beard.
That was my favorite line from the movie.
Yeah. What did they call him? Captain Blondebeard? Is it Blondebeard? I feel like
that, yeah.
I haven't seen this movie in a while.
I tried to watch it the other day. It didn't work on the computer. But so, yeah, those are my two articles. Super exciting technologies coming up.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. Loads of good news for today. That's our time for this segment. But we'll be back, listeners, in a few seconds.
Stick around.
Welcome back. Today we're going to do a new segment. I think we're calling it Versus. And pretty much Ethan and Carter have both prepared arguments on what scientists they believe is more eccentric.
I'm glaring Ethan down right now. I'm ready to rumble.
So they'll do a little back and forth, and then at the end I will decide which one, based on their arguments, I think is more
all right, weird. Because Taylor likes me better.
By prepared, I mean spent 8 minutes browsing the internet.
I think I spent less than that. It didn't take long to.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I'm doing Nikola Tesla.
And I will be arguing on behalf of Henry Cavendish.
And I'll do a quick explanation of who Nikola Tesla is. He was an inventor in the early 1900s, and the biggest thing he did was invent AC power, which was in direct competition with Thomas Edison's invention, which was DC power. However, Nikola Tesla eventually won out because we use AC power predominantly in our power systems. So, but he also had a lot of other eccentricities that are really interesting about him, which we'll get into.
Henry Cavendish was an 18th century physicist who from a wealthy family. And he went to Cambridge, which was interesting for wealthy people to do. Normally they didn't do all that book learning since they already have money. But he's most famous for measuring to extreme accuracy big G, the gravitational constant, through the Cavendish experiment.
Really important stuff. All right, you ready to get down to it?
So, how weird was Tesla exactly?
So real quick, this is how it's going to work. I'm going to go through a list of why I think Tesla is really eccentric, and then Carter will do the same thing, and then after that we'll have our final round where we go back and forth with our last lists.
We'll get our final shots.
We get our final shots.
The big ones.
The big ones. Okay, here we go. Tesla, he rarely slept. He claimed that he never dozed for longer than 2 hours. And he once claimed that he worked for 84 hours straight without any rest.
And how many days is that?
Shoot.
Math.
84 divided by 24. There you go. That's how many days.
Oh, yeah, right. It's a fraction. Just give them in fraction form.
Later in his life, Tesla frequented parks in New York City, often rescuing injured pigeons and nursing them back to health.
I have heard of this.
And when he took up residence at the Hotel New Yorker, he had the hotel chef prepare a special mix of seed for his pigeons that he planned to sell commercially, actually. Tesla was a vegetarian, but eventually he limited himself to a particular diet of only milk, honey, bread, and vegetable juices.
Can you live off of that?
Apparently he did.
Apparently.
He did.
Not very well. But can you live sleeping 2 hours at a time? Apparently.
Apparently, yeah. I mean, he lived to a ripe old age of like 81, I think.
Ooh.
Yeah. Tesla allegedly had a photographic memory. Or eidetic memory?
I think they're both about the same.
They're about the same thing. Okay. And apparently he could memorize, this is less of a quirk and more of a just really cool fact about him. He could memorize entire books. And by reading them, he could like recite them back. It's incredible.
He'd have done well in classes.
I don't know how many I have here, but a couple more. He claimed that he repeatedly, by repeatedly, quote unquote, squishing his toes helped stimulate his brain cells.
Yes, of course.
And apparently he would do this exercise 100 times for each foot before he went to bed at night.
Did he count?
Of course.
Yeah.
How do you count 100 times per foot without counting 100 times per foot?
Of course, that was a bit roundabout, but I see where you're going.
He probably had like a tally system. He just kept his little notebook.
He had like a little clicker with him. He's like,
little clicker.
See, that sounds like someone with OCD.
Yeah, well.
And honestly, maybe all these really quirky dudes actually had OCD, but never diagnosed. Yeah, I don't know exactly what it means by squishing his toes.
I imagine like just sort of curling them into the foot.
Oh, maybe I imagine like.
I thought he was slamming his toes, like actually,
like he was like pushing
on them, like squishing them.
Well, I would think like not like curling them, just kind of like squeezing them together.
Yeah,
like
stimulates the brain cells.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Tesla spent decades as a New York resident, but in order to, no, this was actually kind of cool. He's got a corner in Manhattan named after him. I'll just skip over that one. That was not even really weird. Okay, here's why I talked about death mask earlier. He had a death mask made of him, which is less of a quirk for him and just more of a quirky thing that actually happened. But yeah, it's on display at the Nikola Tesla Museum in Serbia. Really quirky dude.
I'm sure he would approve.
I think you should vote for me, Taylor.
Cavendish had he was very antisocial. He couldn't talk to people very well. When he was getting his doctorate at Cambridge, he got to the point. This is why I identify with Cavendish. He got to the point where he was having to defend his thesis orally. You have to do that when you're getting a PhD,
Right.
and he didn't. He fled. He ran away from Cambridge and went into hiding because he couldn't face the people to talk to them.
Like physically
Oh my
ran,
God.
or
Yeah.
just like
Well, I mean, he left the city he was in. He also he discovered hydrogen, which isn't weird in itself, but which he called inflammable air. But to demonstrate that it was in fact inflammable, or that's En, so it could be lit on fire, he would put metal and acid, which would produce the hydrogen, and he would breathe it in and blow it out onto a candle, which would then explode in his face and burn off his eyebrows and whatnot. But he would do that to show that yes, there is another gas in the air.
Oh my God.
that's wow.
He couldn't talk to women at all, and as he was he was a wealthy man, he had sort of house servants and maids and whatnot, and he would, instead of going up and asking, hey, I want this for dinner or what have you, he would leave them notes around the house. He had made a lot of discoveries in his life, but most of them he just wrote down in a notebook that he then did not publish or tell anyone about. Such discoveries as the unit of capacitance, dielectric constants, Dalton's law of partial pressures, and Coulomb's law, he discovered before any of these were discovered,
Oh
elsewhere.
my gosh.
But he just left them laying around.
Again, less of a quirk. Oh,
Yeah.
well, I suppose he left
He didn't
them
tell
like-
anybody.
didn't
He
tell
just kept
anybody.
them for himself.
He's like, whatever, it's no big deal.
His library that he kept was 4 miles from his house, and he did this on purpose to ensure that no one would come to him and ask to be lent books, because then he would have to go talk to them to get the books back. And the Cavendish experiment, as I mentioned earlier, was a sort of master class in very precise and sort of weird experiments. To measure big G,
Sure.
he held or suspended massive lead balls from the ceiling in his garden shed, and when you're measuring gravity, he couldn't get close to it because he would interfere with
Right.
the gravitational fields. So he set up a telescope, however far away from his garden shed,
Oh
and
my
would look at
gosh.
the experiment through a window in the side of the shed and very precisely measure how much it had turned due to the lead balls sort of being gravitationally attracted to each other.
I think that's a really unique way of solving a problem.
Mhm. And he would be out there
Maybe
in his 60s in all kinds of weather. He'd be huddled over
Spying
a
on his
telescope,
garden shed.
in the rain and snow. This old man just spying on his
just,
garden shed
just looking at his garden shit. Like, can you imagine seeing that from
and just having a
an
notebook
outside
next to him
perspective?
and writing down little numbers
Writing down numbers in a notebook that no one would ever
that
see.
no one would ever see. It was just for him, And speaking of which, that notebook, the aforementioned notebook that he kept, stayed in his house until Clerk Maxwell of Maxwell's equations fame sort of spearheaded a campaign to go discover what Henry Cavendish had
Oh, really?
hidden away in his house.
No kidding.
Yeah, so he was recognized by people.
How nice.
He was just sort of
How nice.
very accepting of himself. He did everything for him. He didn't need anyone else, which I think is very exciting. And these were my first
Alright.
facts of Cavendish
Well,
for round 1.
Before we go to round 2, I should ask Taylor, are you leaning one way or the other? You
Preliminary?
don't have to tell us which one, but are you?
I am leaning one way.
She's thinking
I almost
which,
don't want to know
one's-
which way she's leaning.
No, I don't.
If you don't want to know, I won't tell
Alright,
you.
well, wait.
Maybe we'll talk about
I'll
that
write it
afterwards.
down, and
Yeah,
I can
okay.
let you know after the fact.
All right. So she's already got an idea of who is more eccentric.
Ethan, what is your first final fact about Nikola Tesla?
Tesla could not stand the sight of pearls. To the
that-
extent, yeah,
like that go on necklaces?
like the ones that so to the extent that he refused to speak to women who were wearing them. Apparently, when his secretary wore pearl jewelry, he sent her home for the day.
Nice.
He didn't
leave.
like give her a disclaimer, like, "Hey, I don't like this. Don't do it." She just
Oh,
made
by
her
the
go
way,
home.
don't do it again.
Yeah.
At least he didn't fire her on the spot.
Apparently, I don't know why this is in the same paragraph, but he also wore white gloves to dinner every night and prided himself on being a dapper dresser, quote unquote.
Is that along with your first fact? Do you still have another one?
No, that
Those are
that's-
both of them?
sorry, I added 2. I shouldn't have added another one. I just read it now.
That's
but the
fine.
pearls thing is what I'm
Okay.
putting. That's really eccentric. I
That is-
would put forward
I
that that's
agree.
more eccentric than
That is quite eccentric. However,
not wanting to talk to people.
Henry Cavendish, further on the topic of finding it hard to talk to people, when he was working in this university or that university, whatever his position was, if you wanted to ask him a question, so you were an undergrad and you had a question for your professor, you would have to walk into his office, and instead of addressing him directly, you would question and sort of just ponder to the room, think out loud type thing. And if he was feeling in the mood, he might ponder back to the room and just sort of think out loud. You couldn't ask him. You just had to sort of ask in the vacuum your question, and maybe he would respond to the room.
Oh my gosh.
Which I think is very
All right.
eccentric.
Well, not yeah.
So how was the setup of the room? Like, was he like behind a screen so
I'm
you
sure
just
he
wouldn't see
just
him?
wasn't facing the door, and then you would walk in and just sort of say, I wonder if, and then your question.
Very eccentric, but I do believe I've got something that will beat that. And this is my final fact. So Tesla, apparently he had built a device, which is called a high frequency oscillator. He built it. It was kind of, people called it the earthquake machine. So it had a piston that was underneath a platform in his laboratory, and it shook violently. And so it just like moved the entire building, just shook the entire building. So they called it the earthquake machine. And apparently he was introduced to Mark Twain, who came to his laboratory to check out what he had going on. And he wanted to impress Mark Twain with this device. So he had him come stand in his laboratory on this spot over the machine, and he turned it on unexpectedly. And apparently this was too big of a surprise for Mark Twain, who was known for having digestive problems.
Oh no.
So Mark Twain immediately had to go running out of the room for the nearest bathroom. And as the author of the book where I found this from put it, he shook the poop out of Mark Twain using his earthquake machine.
Was this earthquake machine, it wasn't for anything else? It was just for shaking his house?
No, honestly, I have no
built
idea.
it specifically for shaking things.
Apparently, Mark Twain lasted about 90 seconds, though. I'll give him that.
Pretty good.
That's pretty
This
good.
is another case of famous people meeting famous people in history.
Exactly,
This is why they all
exactly.
congregate together,
Yeah.
which is an
Beat
interesting
that.
phenomenon.
Nikola Tesla shook the poop out of Mark Twain.
I think, well, this isn't even strange. This is just a tour de force of dedication. Henry Cavendish also discovered the idea of the electric potential for the first time before anyone else.
Okay.
And he measured these voltages by running currents through his body and describing how much agony he felt as this was happening. And this is how he sort of, this was his unit of measurement, is how much it hurts when I put my hands on both ends of this battery.
That's just plain stupid. That's not eccentric.
That's dedication.
That's-
That's stupidity.
I would classify that as eccentricity.
Okay. All right. Well, what do you got,
We've
Taylor?
got our shots in.
Drum roll? Do we need a drum roll?
Can I hear first what you were leaning in the preliminary?
Oh,
round?
yeah.
I leaned Cavendish.
Ooh.
And
The breath, the fire breath.
That's what got you?
That's a strong. That's
It's
Yeah.
pretty
Top
eccentric.
notch.
I will give him that. That is pretty eccentric. But,
and
I mean,
now,
birds, pigeons.
I don't know. I'm gonna pick Cavendish.
Oh my gosh.
my
Get out of
boy
here.
Henry.
They're both
Leave,
very
Parker.
interesting, but the points that you brought up
Oh
are
my gosh.
much
They really
stronger.
took it over the edge.
What?
That's
I
good.
think, and
Well-
it's no fault on you, Ethan.
Shook the poop out of Mark Twain.
It's no fault
What
on
other
you.
person
It's-
in
it's-
history can you say that
What
happened?
we really learned here today
too.
is that physicists are interesting people, and we should all go out and do a little research on the men who
Sure.
have
I won't be a sore loser. I will agree
laid
with you.
down the physical sciences. And with that, we're out of time.
Okay.
Listeners, you send in who you thought was the more eccentric physicist, and you've been listening to What's on the Fourth Floor. But what is on the fourth floor?
A laboratory with a high frequency oscillator underneath. that you
It's
can
shaking
shake
the
poop
whole
out of
building.
A
people.
laboratory isn't even a far cry at all for What's on the Fourth Floor of a physics building.
It could be another lab.
I was thinking maybe a morgue or a death mask.
It's the
a
warehouse,
factory.
the death mask
It's the warehouse
It's
where
the
they keep all
warehouse.
of the walls are lined with death masks. It's very, it's a bit macabre. Halloween tours though would be good for.
That'd be
Yeah, they could make money off of that. They could.
Hello? If you're still here, it's because you're looking for more. If that's the case, check us out on Facebook at What's on the Fourth Floor and Twitter at OnFloor4. Again, that's Facebook, What's on the Fourth Floor, Twitter at OnFloor4. That's at OnFloor, the number 4.